Prabhu, the Lord, Hasi, smiling, Nimantrana, invitation, Kaila, made, Angikara, acceptance, Sanyasira, unto the Mayavadi sannyasis, Kripa, to show them mercy, Lagi, for the matter of, this, Bhangi, gesture, Tanhara, his. Lord Chaitanya smiled and accepted the invitation of the Brahmana. He made this gesture to show his mercy to the Mayavadi sannyasis. Purport. Tapana Mishra and Chandrasekhar appealed to the lotus feet of the Lord regarding their grief at the criticism of him by the sannyasis in Benares. Caitanya Mahaprabhu merely smiled, yet he wanted to fulfill the desires of his devotees, and the opportunity came when the Brahmana came to request him to accept his invitation to be present in the midst of the other sannyasis. This coincidence was made possible by the omnipotency of the Lord. Text 57. Sevi prajanena prabhunayat nanakarigara tanhara pranayat tanreyat yagra kare. The Brahmana knew that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu never went to anybody else's house. Yet, due to inspiration from the Lord, he earnestly requested him to accept this invitation. Text 58. Aradina Gela Prabhu Sevi Prabhavani Dekilene Vasichena Sanyasiragane. The next day, when Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to the house of that Brahmana, he saw all the sannyasis of Benares sitting there. Text 59. Sabar namaskari gela pada prakshalani kari vasilastisthane. As soon as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw the sannyasis, he immediately offered obeisances, and then he went to wash his feet. After washing his feet, he sat down by the place where he had done so. Purport. By offering his obeisance to Mayavadi sannyasi, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu very clearly exhibited his humbleness to everyone. Vaishnavas must not be disrespectful to anyone, to say nothing of a sannyasi. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu teaches, Amanina Amadina, one should always be respectful to others but should not demand respect for himself. A sannyasi should always walk barefoot, and therefore when he enters a temple or a society of devotees, he should first wash his feet and then sit down in a proper place. In India, it is still a prevalent custom that one put his shoes in a specified place and then enter the temple barefoot after washing his feet. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is an ideal acharya, and those who follow in his footsteps should practice the methods of devotional life that he teaches us. Text 60. Vasya karikichu ashvara prakasha mahetyo tamaya vapu koti suryabasa. After sitting on the ground, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu exhibited his mystic power by manifesting an effulgence as brilliant as the illumination of millions of suns. Purport. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, is full of all potencies. Therefore, it is not remarkable for him to manifest the illumination of millions of suns. Lord Sri Krishna is known as Yogeshwara, the master of all mystic powers. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Lord Krishna himself. Therefore, he can exhibit his mystic powers. Text 61. Prabhaveya karshila sabha sanyirasamana utila sannyasi sabhacharyarasana. When the sannyasis saw the brilliant illumination of the body of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, their minds were attracted, and they all immediately gave up their sitting places and stood in respect. Purport. To draw the attention of common men. Sometimes saintly persons, acharyas and teachers exhibit extraordinary opulences. This is necessary to attract the attention of fools. But a saintly person should not misuse such power for personal sense gratification like false saints who declare themselves to be God. Even the magician can exhibit extraordinary feats which are not understandable to common men, but this does not mean that the magician is God. It is a most sinful activity to attract attention by exhibiting mystic powers and utilizing this opportunity to declare oneself to be God. A real saintly person never declares himself to be God, but always places himself in the position of a servant of God. For a servant of God, there is no need to exhibit mystic powers, and he does not like to do so, but on behalf of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, a humble servant of God performs his activities in such a wonderful way that no common man can dare try to act like him. Yet a saintly person never takes credit for such actions, because he knows very well that when wonderful things are done on his behalf by the grace of the Supreme Lord, all credit goes to the Master and not the servant. Durgamay parimendasya kalipate gatimuhu swakripa yustadana shanta shanta valambalamam kianatimarandasya jananjana salakaya chaksu militam yena tasmay shri gurave namaha. So this is just a little wonderful piece of Caitanya Caritamrita. I just want to give a little bit of a background on this particular incident that Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu, he was invited to come to Benares of Varanasi, and he was invited by his good disciples, Chandrasekhar Prabhu and what's the other one? Tapana Mishra. So Benares had been for many thousands of years, it had been like the hub of Mayavadism. People walking around in Benares were just mentioning two words starting with M: moksha, mukti. So it was the path to moksha and mukti was part of neti, not this, not that. Just the applications of the senses, studying the philosophy, and we'll all merge with the Supreme. We'll all become one. So they were all going around chanting to each other, Om Namo Narayan. So when they greeted each other, Om Namo Narayan, so they regarded everybody as Narayan. So it was just a question of time when they're all going to merge into mukti, will become part of the Brahmayoti. There's one reason also why Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu used to block his ears when someone used to refer to him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead Narayan. He said, Vishnu, Vishnu, go away from me. Because actually this was the philosophy of the Mayavadis, that everybody was God. So this was just cheapening the process of the potency of God. Of course, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu used to say that I'm not God, I'm just a servant of the servant of the servant. Das anudas anudas. So for all those Mayavadi sannyasis, their process was the study of Shastra Jnana in order that they can achieve the ultimate goal of mukti, moksha, and they knew that this material world is just this illusory place, this phantasmagoria, so therefore they didn't take any part of it. They had this philosophy, neti, not this, not that. Right, that's so Lord Chaitanya, he was a contradiction. He was this young sannyasi that had taken sannyas from Keshava Bharat, who was a well-known Mayavadi scholar, but still Lord Chaitanya was breaking the rules, that he was chanting and he was dancing. And of course singing and dancing, that's the first to go, neti, not this, no singing, no dancing, that's out, you have to be sober, you have to study. So yet this sannyasi was going, chanting and dancing, and there was no study of philosophy. They'd heard that this Caitanya Mahaprabhu, he was once that famous scholar that defeated Kashmiri Pandit, the most renowned scholar, the one who received the benediction from Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and no one could defeat him. And Lord Chaitanya just defeated him on the banks of the river in the moonlight. just humbled him. So they knew that he was a foremost scholar, but he wasn't studying. He was just chanting the words Hare, Krishna and Rama. Not only that, when he was chanting, he was crying uncontrollably, rolling on the ground, not controlling his emotions. That was just simply unacceptable for a sannyasi. So this was, everybody was throwing their bit into the ring, what they'd seen of Lord Chaitanya, that he was this and he was that. So that was the talk of the town in Benares. Lord Chaitanya was the talk of the town. So somehow or other, by Lord Chaitanya's mercy, by his omnipotency, this Brahmana, he came and invited everybody to his house. So Lord Chaitanya was the last one that he asked, and he came, he was very, very humble in his approach, because he could understand that Lord Chaitanya was not taking any association of these Mayavadi sannyasis that was just eating by himself. Yet he very, very humbly asked that, can you please come? And so Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport here that that is the prerequisite of a master and a disciple, that one approaches spiritual master humbly in all humility. Trinadapi sunichana taro pi sishna. So no, tadvidi panipatina pariprasyena sevaya. So just learn to know the truth by approaching a spiritual master submissively. So in this particular case, Lord Chaitanya, he accepted this invitation because it was the arrangement of the Supreme. Because there was two purposes that he wanted to achieve. First, he wanted to achieve the anxiety of Chandrasekhara and Tapana Misri's faithful devotees who were hearing all this criticism of Lord Chaitanya, and it was actually creating them such a great disturbance within their heart to hear the criticism of their spiritual master. And secondly, he wanted to defeat all these Mayavadis and turn them into Vaishnavas. So Srila Prabhupada talks about Lord's omnipotency, that the Lord can achieve two purposes at once. So there are many instances in the Shastras where this omnipotency of the Lord has been exhibited. I'll just ask anybody if they can tell me of some of this. I'll try and get 3 examples. So is anybody can give me an example of the Lord's omnipotence in his different pastimes, his different incarnations? Anyone? Yes, Mani.
Krishna showed Arjuna the universal form for etc. Is that what you're talking about?
No. There are 2 purposes in one. So I think at that point in time, Arjuna just directly asked to see his universal form. Not quite what I wanted. Anybody? There's Krishna Kirtan.
Caitanya Mahaprabhu appearing at Kanihati.
Yes, maybe. Yes, Madhuji. I'm sorry. Yes, Anasuya. Oh.
There was that time where one of the young Brahmana wanted to be a part of the kirtan, the Srivasacharya's house, and he wasn't allowed to, but then he came back and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't see him, but knew he was there, and he said something to the kirtan.
That's good, yeah, because, yep. Okay, so anybody else? One more? Nope. Okay, so the example I was thinking of was actually in Krishna's pastime of Mani Griva Nalakuvera. They were standing there as twin Arjun trees, right? And they'd been there for thousands of years because they were acting inappropriately in front of Narad Muni, and he chastised them, gave them he benedicted them by cursing them to become trees for a long period of time. But it was a benediction in the sense that they were going to be liberated by Krishna. So they were standing there waiting to be liberated by Krishna. And Krishna's this young, little, beautiful baby who's really misbehaving badly. So Mother Yasoda had no option but to tie him to a grinding mortar. And these trees were very close together, and the grinding mortar was just slightly bigger than the two trees. So when she tied him, she said, "There, that's going to keep you still, and you won't get up to any mischief." And of course, all of Krishna's friends are looking on, they're watching, what's happening to Krishna. So Krishna sort of is tied to the mortar, so he begins to crawl, and this big heavy mortar starts to follow him. He crawls a little bit more, the mortar's following after him. And so he crawls in between the two Arjuna trees, and that mortar gets stuck in the between the two trees, and it keeps crawling and it keeps crawling. And all of a sudden there's this almighty crack, and these two huge trees come crashing down onto the ground. There we go. What's this? What happened? What happened? And the young boys are going, "Well, his mother tied him to his grinding mortar here, and he's crawling around with the grinding mortar, and he crawled in between the two trees, and he pulled the trees down with the grinding mortar." They say, these young boys, they're so mischievous, they make up all these things. So anyway, he liberated Manigriva, another Kavera. So that was a dual purpose. That's Krishna's omnipotence. And of course we know that when Manigriva, another Kavera, were liberated, they went back to the spiritual world, and they took the forms of Snigdhakanta and Muktakanta and the Gopal Champu, and they were reciting all the wonderful pastimes of Krishna to all the residents of Goloka Vrindavan. So that was a beautiful pastime. So in this manner, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu accepted the invitation because that Brahmana asked him so nicely. He went to his house, and then we have this wonderful picture in the Caitanya Caritamrita that this house was actually full of Mayavadi sannyasis. And Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, he was the last one of the last ones to get there, so he washed his feet. That was a sort of process which the Vaishnava Prabhupada explains that this is a process. So this is Lord Chaitanya sitting there, and he sat down next to the spot where he washed his feet. And of course he began to emanate this effulgence. So all the Mayavadi sannyasis noticed this wonderful effulgence. But just quickly with washing the feet, that this is a custom that Prabhupada actually began when I first came to Krishna consciousness, even though it's not so clear now. I remember in Melbourne Temple that I think we used to wash our feet before there was a tap there. We go to the temple, wash our feet before we went to the temple. Certainly when we went to the temple in Vrindavan, we all washed our feet before we went inside our temple. I remember us actually maybe washing our feet and our hands and our mouth before we ate prasadam. This was in the early days. This is, I suppose, one of the rites, the rituals that Ajita Prabhu was talking about yesterday, that somehow or other it's sort of become secondary. It's still there, but sometimes in our execution of Krishna consciousness here in the West, it's not very practical. Just as like there is some angst when people wash their mouth in the sink and they spit in the sink, that it doesn't actually look that good. So actually, that if someone wants to wash their mouth, it's quite all right, but they usually just go around the back somewhere and spit it out. So we don't have that facility anymore, but certainly that was the tradition. So Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, he sat down on the ground next to where, and when people wash, the water's all splashed over the ground, and the place is a little bit muddy. So Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu chose to sit there. And then he just turned up the heat a little bit on his, turned up his effulgence. Of course, the Lord's effulgence, that's his pure spiritual energies, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There's no material tinge, and if he had wanted to, he could have exhibited the effulgence of 1,000,000 suns, like in the spiritual planet in Goloka Vrindavan is more effulgent than the Brahma Yodi. So even the Lord himself, when he manifests, even like even when the demigods go to the planet of Lord Vishnu in Vaikuntha, Lord Vishnu is so effulgent that maybe only Brahma and the Lord Brahma and other senior demigods can see him. The effulgence is there. What to speak of Goloka Vrindavan, that when you go to Goloka just to see the Lord, you need the eyes, the special eyes to see. So Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu was sitting there in all humility. So that is the humility that he was exhibiting as a Vaishnava. And so the Vaishnavas, they even though Lord Chaitanya showed omnipotency of the Supreme Lord, still he was not inclined to exhibit his potencies, because sometimes in the material world, if there is anybody exhibits any potency, then they become very, very proud. So Lord Chaitanya prays Trinada Pisa Nichana Tarapisana Ishnuna Namani Namani Dina. So Namani Namani Dina means devoid of all sense of false prestige. So Srila Prabhupada talks about a person who is engaged on the spiritual path, that they tend to become a little bit they tend to become puffed up by their prowess. He said even a magician, in the purport he mentions a magician, that sometimes a magician can perform tricks that people can't understand, and then he becomes puffed up. And I know that to be a fact, because it was very, very embarrassing. I used to go and see my mother when she was alive 5-6 years ago, and they had the current magician of that time. You know, they go through all these magicians, world famous magicians, but there was this guy called Dynamo, and she'd tell me, oh, there's a God, he's appeared on this earth. It was so embarrassing, and she showed me Dynamo doing all these tricks, and she thought he was God because he can perform all these tricks. It was really embarrassing, but I guess that's the mentality of the common person. So once Srila Prabhupada was in New York, they got a magician to perform some tricks just to entertain Srila Prabhupada in New York. All the devotees were sitting there, and this magician was doing his stuff, and he'd come up to Prabhupada and he'd sort of reach behind Prabhupada's ear, and he pulled out an apple, and he's showing this apple there, sort of putting Prabhupada in a little bit of a compromising position there, and he goes, oh, Srila Prabhupada, can you do this? Can you create apples? So Srila Prabhupada answered, he's going, well, I came here only a couple of years ago. I had nothing, I had very, very little, but by Krishna's will, some people started listening to me, and they started chanting Hare Krishna, and they got a nice center, and we went and spread this Krishna consciousness, and over the last couple of years we've opened up temples all around the world. We have 50 temples now, and in every one of these temples we have lots and lots of apples. We have green apples and red apples. We have lots of apples now. So that's it's instruction. So there's a humility that the spiritual master, of course, is free from ahankara, is devoid of all sense of false prestige. Of course, we read in the Bhagavatam of the yogis who mastered all the siddhis, all the perfections, or the mystic perfections, And they've caused so much trouble throughout the pages of the Bhagavatam. All the mystic yogis like the Vasu Muni have become very offended that Ambarish Maharaj just drank a cup of water before he had come back from his bath, even though he was just due to break a fast. That was intolerable. So other mystic yogis become very, very angry and curse people because their prestige is uprooted. So therefore, one has to understand that everything comes from the Lord. That is the potency of the Lord. Anything we have, even us in our day-to-day activities, whatever abilities we have, if we cook a really, really nice meal, that is the potency of Krishna's potency. If we perform some wonderful feat, some wonderful preaching feat, or we make lots of money, we don't, oh, I'm a great businessman, you know, we don't think that. We think that Krishna's actually endowed me with this potency, and that is the potency of the devotee of the Lord. So just like Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu exhibited this wonderful effulgence, so sometimes also in Christian pictures, if we look at the old pictures, even in the pictures of the Goswamis, you see that they paint a halo, right? An effulgence around the face, that there is some effulgence there, that person stands out spiritually. You can see by his spiritual effulgence. So sometimes I used to think, how did Srila Prabhupada manifest this effulgence? Because sometimes you don't know what to expect when you see the spiritual master. Oh, Srila Prabhupada's coming, Srila Prabhupada's coming. And I know once when Srila Prabhupada arrived, first time I ever saw Srila Prabhupada was, I opened the doors of the temple in Melbourne Temple, and they were greeting the deities, and just as I opened the door, Srila Prabhupada was paying his obeisances to Lord Jagannath right in front of me. I know I sort of felt this sort of surcharge of electricity or energy or whatever, but then I looked and I noticed, oh, Srila Prabhupada is not that big and he's very humble. And from the back, he looked saintly, but that effulgence, that glow wasn't there. I was sort of trying to analyze that. But the fact is that, like, all the devotees around him were just surcharged with this energy. Whenever anybody heard that Srila Prabhupada was coming, people wouldn't sleep. They'd be working on the temple all night. They'd be doing marathons. They'd be doing everything that they possibly could, just every little detail to serve their spiritual master. They were surcharged with energy. So that's where you could see that even though Srila Prabhupada wasn't emanating a glow or a halo, still this energy there was translated in all of his disciples there. I was just listening to an interview between John Lennon and Srila Prabhupada. John Lennon mentioned this, that you can tell the potency of a spiritual master by the strength of his disciples. So certainly that potency was there. One time when I was, I've just been, the second time Srila Prabhupada came back, I think I was just initiated, and the day after that, everybody was having a Guru Puj. We're all there glorifying Srila Prabhupada. It was the same intensity, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. And maybe for just a second or so, I was just contemplating this fact that how is this potency coming from this man here, and he's sitting there, he's my guru. Or just sort of halfway there, more or less, sort of thinking about these things, and all of a sudden I see that Prabhupada's gaze was fixed upon me. So just like I was looking at him, and then he was looking directly at me, and it went on for this period of time. I don't know how long, and I couldn't actually turn away, that he just locked onto me. And then, you know, just a moment of time was gone, and then, you know, Jaya Prabhupada. So that was the sort of my experience with the spiritual master, that that he had the potency there, and he actually had Krishna potency where a lot of times he could fulfill the desires of his devotees in a very, very extraordinary way, but without having to make a whole show of it. So then we can understand that he was following in the footsteps of Krishna, and just Lord Chaitanya, following the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya, was just das anu das. He was just being a servant of Krishna, and that's the example Lord Chaitanya gives us in this particular book here, in this particular story here, of his sitting there in the house of that Brahmana, waiting to be called upon by the Mayavadi sannyasis. It's a beautiful story. So next week, I can't wait to hear the story next week. All the sannyasis call him up and say, why are you doing this? Why are you chanting and dancing? You should be sannyasi. So he explains this very nicely. And so this is the example that we get, that we just, Prabhupada and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are just encouraging us to become good servants. That's all we really have to do, just be good servants of Krishna. Yeah. Are there any questions or comments? Now coming, yeah. I was just trying to think another one of Krishna's examples of Krishna's omnipotency. Have I forgotten? No. Yes, Prabhu. Yes. Say that loud again, please.
Every morning we chant that verse of Rama Samhita, so Krishna is by seeing me. That's an example of omnipotency. He doesn't need to use his hands. Another example of omnipotency of Prabhupada is like he's lying there and Lakshmiji's massaging his lotus feet. Without even any, like sexual contact with Lakshmi, he could go towards the mind.
Jai.
He doesn't need the things we need to do what we do. He just does it at his own energy.
Jai, thank you very much. We all good? Jai, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you very much.